My granduncle was in the hospital. He was very ill. And we were getting reports that he was yelling and screaming and talking to people who weren't there. Could you imagine that? Have you heard of that happening or witnessed it? Stay tuned to hear more of this story. So my granduncle, Uncle Richard is his name. When he was in his final days, he had what some consider to be obnoxious behavior. He would throw things at people who weren't there. He would talk to them. He would tell them to get out of his room. And his caregivers and even the people at the hospital would be like, we don't know who he's talking to. But then he would start naming individuals who were family members. So my mom, who was in constant communication with my uncle and the caregivers, would give us these updates, and my husband would graciously check and find out, oh yes, the loved ones who have crossed over are with him. They're trying to help him to move forward into the next realm where he's supposed to go, but he's refusing to go. So my point of the story is that a lot of individuals seem to experience seeing a loved one of some kind or a close friend right before they're ready to cross over, as I say, transition, because there really is no death. The body might die, but the soul never dies. And that's what we're talking about today. Honey?
Peanut butter?
Oh, that might be a good sandwich.
Is it peanut butter jelly?
Peanut butter and honey. That would go good together.
Oh. Okay.
Do you want to talk? I would like for you to talk about your experience with your uncle, Brother Tom.
He didn't, I don't think he fits that, does he? Because he didn't talk to anybody or anything like that. No one questioned his...
No one questioned him.
Right. So I don't see how that
But the
fits.
experience he had, though, when he told you how he was walking with Jesus and talking with Jesus,
Right, but that's different.
and
That's
then you
not,
witnessed it.
No, but that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, from what you're saying.
Right, for the loved ones and friends. All right.
No,
so-
we're talking about individuals with what we might consider, we as in people, would consider erratic behavior, right? Or questionable behavior.
Right.
He didn't have that. Now maybe if he had told somebody else that, what he told me, they would think he had lost his mind, but he didn't tell anybody that. He only told me.
Okay.
Make sense?
Makes sense.
So I don't want to talk about it, but it doesn't really fit. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, right.
After we've talked it through here.
Got it. But now going back to, let's say, for example, your grand-uncle, and I call him your uncle, to me that fits because, I mean, he was a very intelligent man,
Yes.
a very credible man.
Yes, a very sound mind.
Exactly. Right?
Even through those final days.
So when all of a sudden he started talking to individuals that are not there, and then he's screaming, and the caregiver is wondering if he's mad at her or who knows what's going on. That's what we're talking about. Then you said something that he threw things at people that weren't there.
Yes, to get them out of the room.
No, but that's what you said.
Right.
However, remember that the way we got the report was that he was throwing those things at who? The nurses at the hospital.
Oh, yes, he threw
That's-
things at nurses too.
That's how they saw it.
Right,
Because
yeah.
they're in the room.
Right.
So they're thinking he's throwing it at them. You see how it could seem as obnoxious behavior?
Yes.
All right. So what do you want me to talk about? I just said what. Well, you came to me and asked me what was going on. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. I asked you to find out what was going on.
Okay,
Because
so-
this is what was being reported.
Right.
Did you find out, are there souls over there talking to him? And that's when you came, you said, yes, they're trying to get him to cross over.
So what's the point? This is a very short video, folks. So what's the point of the story then?
point of the story is if you have someone who is very ill, dying,
Not necessarily very ill, but just
or
when
or
they get
just-
close to the time to pass, the
right,
transition.
whose body is dying, the physical body is dying, then they might start talking about loved ones that they see or have dreams about loved ones. Like my grandmother, my mom's mom, she used to say a lot about how I jumped up my mom and dad. They came in a car to pick me up, but I didn't want to go with them. I told them I wasn't ready. You know, and then it would be an aunt and an uncle or a good friend of hers. So there are a lot of dreams that she would have about that happening before she passed on.
Okay,
So-
that's one type of scenario where they have the dreams, and to them it's just dreams.
Right.
But how about the individuals like your granduncle who was screaming at people?
Right. He
Well, that
was-
happened. Do you remember why I told you that was happening?
Well, I thought it was because he just didn't want to go yet. He didn't understand what was happening.
Okay, it's not that because he didn't want to go. It's because he did not understand what was happening.
Okay.
Right? There's a difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So if well, imagine you're there and you're ill. All of a sudden you start to see these people walking around the room. Some you know and some you don't know.
And you haven't seen them for years because you know they died.
Exactly. All of a sudden now they show up. What would you do?
I would be like, "What are you doing here? Get out!"
Exactly. Now,
Yes.
does that sound like a conversation he was having?
Yes, it does.
Good.
Uh-huh.
So now imagine you're a nurse or you're the caretaker and you walk into the room and they says, "What are you doing here? Get out!"
Yes, and
What
the nurse
are you
or
thinking
caretaker
now?
would be thinking that he was talking to them, and that he was just
Exactly.
an old mean man.
You see how it's misinterpreted all of a sudden?
Right.
I said, "Wow, he's acting so mean," and they don't realize that he's not even talking to them. He probably didn't even realize that they were in the room because he's watching these other people that are in the room that are getting on his nerves.
Right. Well, I think it's also noteworthy to mention here, however you say that once that was told to us, what was taking place with my uncle, we were also told that my mom should go and talk to him and let him know what was happening and what to expect, and that he would see Archangel Michael and his loved ones, and he should just go with them when he feels ready, because they'll help him take him to where he needs to go. And I think it was just maybe a couple weeks after that he finally just passed and crossed over.
Well, you skipped a very important portion, and that portion is that the reason why your mom was guided to go talk to him was to get him to understand that he was close to transitioning. Remember,
Oh, right.
what was mentioned, what was revealed to us is that he didn't know what to expect once he passed. So he was afraid of passing because who knows what's going to happen. I mean, how many people are on this earth, and because of what the church tells us, especially if you're Catholic, and again, because we're Catholics,
Right.
you know, if you're not Catholic, you're not going to make it, right? You have to be Catholic to make it to heaven.
Well,
Pretty
yes,
much, right?
from what we've been taught, yes.
Exactly. So now, and he was not Catholic, from what you told me. So what do you think he's thinking if he believed any of that? And maybe he didn't even believe it. Maybe it was just like, wait a minute. Now that I'm this close, maybe I really should have converted to Catholicism. You know, who knows what he was thinking. The point is that I was told that he was scared of the unknown, and so he refused to die. He did not want to die. And somebody had to explain to him that it's not the way he thinks it is. He's not going to be punished for not being Catholic or not being a Christian. And then we were told that your mom should tell him, have that conversation that you talked about earlier. But I just wanted to fill in that space because like, you went from one thing all the way to that part, and it's like, wait a minute, how did we get there? So there was this one thing that was revealed to us about his fear of dying. So I go back to this. Are there other people, do you think, that would be in his situation where they're just afraid to transition?
Yes. I think there are a lot of people who are.
So if you were to think about that, if they're afraid to transition, what do you think the behavior would be like?
Well, if they're seeing or hearing people who've crossed over, I think it would be the same kind of behavior, like, what's happening? You know, why are you here? Go away, you're not real. And they might even think that they're going crazy.
Right? So you understand now that these folks are not, it's not like they're losing their mind or all of a sudden they've gotten obnoxious in their behavior and they become mean overnight.
Right.
You know, it's none of that. It's they're dealing with what they're seeing, which is a reality for them, and they might not even realize it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that it's real because now they're spending more time in the spiritual realm instead of the physical realm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you want me to cover, or?
No. I think that's it.
Well, there were some other things there. For example, he was having pain.
Right.
How was that handled?
Oh, well, anytime he'd have pain and the medications weren't working, my mom would let us know so that you could have work done to help him to ease the pain so that he could relax, be more comfortable.
So even though he was in a spiritual realm, well, he was actually easier to do the work.
Right.
No, I said, but he was spending time in the spiritual realm, right? That's the only reason why you're seeing these folks.
Right.
You know, unless if you can see them while you're in the physical realm, but not too many people can do that.
Right.
But even though he was spending time in the spiritual realm, he was still experiencing pain in the physical body. But it was easier to do work on him because it's spiritual work. You know, we call it spiritual work as it's in the spiritual realm.
Right.
So it takes effect faster, and then we understand that he actually would feel improvement during those times, right?
Yes.
The funny part, that we're going to talk about one, I hope we talk about some others. I remember there was a time when he was acting up in the hospital. And then he was just throwing things all over the place. And then we got the phone call.
That he wasn't cooperating.
Exactly.
He just wanted them to leave him alone. He just wanted to go back home.
And then
we got the phone call of what his behavior was like, but he needed to, get some kind of a treatment. It was for an infection of some kind. And my mom just said, if there's anything you can do to help out, please do so, because we need to get Uncle Richard to cooperate. They won't send him home unless he has this procedure done so that he can be stabilized at home. And so my husband went ahead and he requested the work to be done, and within, I think, just a few hours, they said, my mom called and she said that the doctors and everybody were surprised at how calm he became, and he became very cooperative, and they were able to do what they needed to do, and he'd be going home the following day.
So why do you think I would ask you to bring that up?
So individuals understand that if their loved one or someone they know is in the hospital experiencing something like that, they can always reach out to 190 Vision and request help for that individual so that things can be done to help them with whatever's supposed to happen for
That's
them.
correct. They didn't change all of a sudden. They really are in a different reality, and they don't realize that at that time. And the folks that do realize it, they embrace it and they're quiet about it, like my uncle was. So we can talk about that now, because he knew that he was passing.
Right.
And so when he took me with him through the garden with Jesus, he's walking with Jesus, he was just showing me where he was going. He wasn't scared because he was a priest, so he knows what that was all about, or a brother, But the people that don't understand, of course, they're scared. And they'll seem like they're mean in their behavior. And they'll be screaming because they want these people to get away from them. And they see their ancestors that passed, they see people that they don't know, that they don't recognize, and that can be scary. So do you know anybody else? You've had a lot of relatives that have passed, that's why I'm asking you.
Yes, but most of them have come through after they've passed. It's not so much helping them as they were going through the experience of crossing over.
Oh, okay.
I mean, my dad, but that was just really giving him messages,
Right.
That he has the choice to stay or to go. It's up to him.
Well, I remember your grandma Joan, because I met her.
Right.
And I remember when you guys were waiting for her to pass, she was at your parents' house.
Yes.
Right? And we were just friends at that time.
Right.
But I remember that she and I would talk a lot before she got sick. With all of her cussing and everything. She could cuss.
She's a character.
But I remember when she was laying there. I still remember that. I think and this just came to me. I remember that she was laying there in the bed one time, and then she said, "Ken, come here." And I went, and she held my hand, and then she said, "You're single, right?" I said, yes, ma'am, I'm single. And she said, good. She said, you know, my granddaughter, Laura, she's single, right? I said, I know she's single. And then she told me, take care of her. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, you two could be really good together. That's what she said. Did I ever tell you about that?
No.
She actually told me that.
No.
And then she said, she's like a green garden filled with vegetables. Take care of the garden. I'm like, okay.
See, now after she passed, you told me that she, at the funeral, you said she's showing me and she's giving me this green container.
Right.
Do you know of any container that she has? Because she wants me to have this green container. I'm like, a green container? So as my mom was going through all of my grandmother's belongings, I'm like, Mom, just look for a green container. Any green container. She found one, and Ken looked at it. He's like, that's not it. That's not the container. We never found the container. And then I think it was a few years later, or a couple of years later, that I think it was after we got engaged when she came through and she said that I was the green container that you're supposed to take care of.
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
I'm the green container. Okay then.
Well, that's because you. Well, we're not going to talk about that here. You don't have any boyfriends and stuff like that. Never engaged in any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
You were green. I didn't know that though. Right? So that's
my grandmother's way of communicating.
So we found that out later on, folks.
Yes.
That my wife was a pure container.
Yes. Anyway.
From your grandmother, right? But when she said, I was like, okay. I was just being respectful, like, okay, ma'am, okay, Grandma Joan. That was it.
But I do remember with Grandma Jones passing, I had called you late at night to let you know, my mom's really concerned that my grandma won't be alive for when my Uncle Dennis, that's my mom's brother, got there to say goodbye to her. And you had told me not to worry about that, but I should let my grandma know that she can just relax, and when the time comes, she just goes with Archangel Michael. I was like, okay. So I went over to Mom and Dad's place right away and sat down with Grandma, and I don't know if she understood anything because she was like in and out of consciousness. I know, but at that time I didn't, because she was like in and out of consciousness. She might open her eyes and look and then close her eyes and roll her head again. So I just gave her the message, and it was like maybe I think 11 o'clock at night when my uncle finally got into town, and he sat with my grandmother for a few hours, and then he left around, I think what Mom said was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And then by 4 or 5 in the morning, Grandma she had crossed over. So I was like, wow, that was really cool.
And that's what happens, right? A lot of us want to hold on to individuals, but once we understand that they need to be let go, or we need to let them go so they can move on and go accomplish their mission in the next lifetime if they're supposed to embody, then it makes it easy for everybody. Then they let go once you tell them. It's all right, don't worry about me, I'll be fine.
Indeed.
Then they take that breath and that's it. They're done. Yep. So the point is that they might say things that don't seem to make sense to you if you're around them. They might act as though they're mean, or they're talking to nobody, but they haven't lost their minds. They're actually seeing beings on the other side in the spiritual realm, and they're communicating with them either calmly because they realize what's going on and they accept it, or they're screaming and shouting and kicking and fighting because they feel confused about what's happening, or they're scared about what's happening. And they don't know how to explain that to anybody because they don't even realize that you're there. They're looking at, they're caught up in that spiritual realm at that moment. So as far as the physical, they don't know the other people in the room. And so we should just be aware of that they are in a different dimension, and just wait for them to come back and know that they are seeing what's real. They're not imagining at all. And they didn't change again all of a sudden to become these mean people. It's just fair. So find the time to communicate with them once they've calmed down to help them to transition. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up.
My beautiful green garden.
All right, folks, if you enjoyed this topic, stay tuned for another one. Remember to subscribe and like this video. Join the Facebook group 190 Vision to connect with others on the same journey. Get help by visiting our website 190vision.com. Support the 190 Vision mission by clicking on the Donate button, which is at the bottom of each page of our website.